Okay, let's start with something, well, quite surprising. What if you learned that basically half the global population might be going through a profound biological shift right now?
It's a huge claim, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's something our sources are really digging into some, frankly, concerning changes apparently happening specifically to males.
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we've got sources pointing to some pretty alarming trends in male biology and health. So our mission today is really to unpack what these sources are saying, trying to understand the shifts they're reporting, and look into the different theories about what could possibly be causing them.
And the data they present is, well, it's stark.
It really is. Get this.
Huh.
One source from the University of Copenhagen found that male sperm rates seem to have dropped by about 50%.
50%?
Yeah, 50% over just the last 50 years. That's not just a small blip.
No, not at all. And it has potentially massive implications, for reproduction, population trends globally. And what's really striking and concerning is that the sources say it isn't just about sperm rates.
Yeah.
They also highlight documented increases in certain male reproductive deformities seen right at birth.
Okay.
And maybe even more dramatic, testosterone levels. They seem to have dropped significantly in just the last couple of generations.
And testosterone, that's crucial, isn't it? Widely seen as key for male development, general health.
Absolutely. It influences so much. Muscle mass, mood, behavior, you name it. So, yeah, a decline like that is a major, major red flag for the researchers looking into this.
Okay, so we have these clear biological changes that scientists seem to be measuring consistently. Sperm down, deformities up, testosterone dropping. But here's the real puzzle that our sources keep coming back to. While there seems to be broad agreement on what's happening, there's apparently no scientific consensus on the main reason behind all these different changes.
Exactly. That's the core mystery. We see the effects, but the cause still debated. It's a huge scientific question with potentially global consequences.
Which is why this deep dive is so important, I think. If the experts agree on the symptoms, but not the cause, what are the main ideas floating around?
Well, our sources seem to point to two major schools of thought emerging.
Okay.
One perspective comes from researchers like Professor Richard Sharp. He's a male fertility specialist over at the University of Edinburgh Center. His research suggests the root cause might be something going wrong very, very early. We're talking about during the development of the male fetus.
Early? How early?
Like something is interfering with the fundamental steps needed for healthy male development right from the start.
So when you say interfering, are we talking genetics or maybe something environmental the mother is exposed to? What does Sharp's work suggest there?
Yeah, it's about a disruption of that initial developmental process. The sources suggest it could be a mix of things, maybe subtle genetic factors making someone more vulnerable, or perhaps the mother's diet, or even exposure to certain substances while the fetus is in utero. It pushes the problem's origin way back.
So not something that happens later in life necessarily, but right at the foundational stage.
Exactly. The idea is the damage might be happening during those absolutely critical moments of formation.
That's a really powerful concept that it could all stem from the very beginning. But okay, there's another side to this coin, right? Other researchers are pointing more directly at, well, environmental chemicals.
Yes, that's the second major theory highlighted in the sources.
Yeah.
And specifically, they're looking hard at plastics.
Plastics, like the stuff in food containers and water bottles.
Precisely, those everyday items. This theory definitely leads down some intriguing and frankly quite alarming paths.
How so? What's the connection?
Well, the idea is that certain chemicals used in making these plastics can potentially mess with our body's hormone system, the endocrine system. Professor Sharp actually is also cited in the context of studying these effects, particularly a substance called phthalates.
The phthalates. Okay, I've heard of those. They used to make plastic softer, right?
Exactly. They're everywhere, used worldwide to make plastics flexible. But the key issue, according to these sources, is that they can act as endocrine disruptors.
Meaning they interfere with hormones.
Yes, they can mimic or block the action of certain natural hormones in the body.
So it's not just about plastic being inert. It's that these chemicals might be sending faulty signals inside our bodies, like a wrong key messing up the lock.
That's a really good analogy. They might fit into hormone receptors, but trigger the wrong response or block the right one. And this could fundamentally disrupt development.
And it gets even more intense because some researchers quoted in our sources actually call phthalates what was the term? A gender-bending chemical.
Right, that's a provocative term they use.
Why that specific term? What does it imply?
Well, according to these sources, it's because phthalates can mimic estrogen. The concern is that this estrogen-like effect could cause biological shifts during male development, potentially affecting physical traits, reproductive function, essentially nudging development in ways that might be considered biologically more typically female.
So these chemicals are sort of confusing the body's hormonal signals, especially during those crucial early stages we talked about.
That's the core concern highlighted in this line of research, yes.
Yeah.
Fitting into hormone receptors and telling the body it's getting estrogen, even when it shouldn't be.
Wow. Okay, so when you put that idea together with the data points, the falling sperm counts, lower testosterone, the rise in deformities,
hmm
you can see why many researchers cited in our sources start to describe this whole picture as a kind of wide-ranging attack on males.
It does paint a very dramatic and quite concerning picture based on the cumulative data presented in the sources, suggesting something fundamental might be changing.
Right. So let's just recap where we are. The sources we've looked at describe these really significant measurable changes happening in male biology. We've got the declining sperm, the lower testosterone, increased deformities at birth. The what seems pretty clear.
Yes, the data points seem consistent across multiple studies mentioned, but the why remains elusive, that central puzzle.
And we've touched on the two main theories trying to explain it. First, Professor Sharp's idea that something's going wrong very early on in fetal development, disrupting those foundational steps.
Correct. A disruption at the very beginning.
And second, this environmental chemical theory, which really zooms in on plastics and specifically phthalates.
Yeah, those chemicals described by some sources, quite starkly, as gender bending, because they seem to mimic estrogen and could potentially feminize aspects of male development, according to that research.
And it's this combination, the sperm decline, low testosterone, the deformities, plus these chemical exposure concerns, that leads many researchers in these sources to frame it as this wide-ranging attack, a fundamental alteration.
It's a strong characterization, certainly, reflecting the breadth of the reported issues.
It really makes you think, what stands out most to you from all this? I mean, the fact that the scientific community itself is still actively searching for definitive answers here is pretty significant.
Absolutely. It underscores the complexity. And it really highlights why it's so important, as you're listening, to consider these different perspectives. There isn't one simple answer right now.
Definitely. Which leads us to a final thought, something to maybe mull over. Given how profound and varied these suggested impacts on male biology are, what could the long-term societal implications be? Or even evolutionary ones if these trends continue and we don't pin down a cause or find ways to address it?
It's a heavy question.
It is. What does it mean for future generations if, as these sources suggest, the very sort of biological blueprint for male development is being altered in ways we don't fully understand yet? We seem to be just scratching the surface.